There's empty chairs where there weren't empty chairs before. But anyway, we're going to start. No, don't take it personally, Margot. We are now in public, just as a reminder, and there are two parts to this session. The first being on stormwater, and then we move on to the consumer advocacy stuff. So, and basically just straight over to you, Margot and Charlotte. I nearly make you like Brangelina or something. Sorry about that.
I think that's a bit of a compliment, actually. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. It's good to be back in front of you again. So, as our Chair has indicated, so this is a briefing on our advice following your amendment in the May LTP committee meeting, is seeking more direction around stormwater in particular. So I am aware that a number of you attended the regional stormwater briefing yesterday. So first of all, thank you very much for making that time. It's very much appreciated. And I'm pretty sure we're not going to regurgitate a lot of what was covered yesterday, unless, of course, there's any areas you would like us to go into. But just to be clear, that this is focusing on the amendment as opposed to a generic briefing. So today we will look to spend, if I can get the clicker working, we will look to spend about 10 or 15 minutes presenting to you, sharing our advice, working through the logic, and then open the floor to your questions. Thank you very much. There's a couple of things we do want to step you through just around some context. Particularly, there has been some changes made since the amendment, so we think that it would be good information for you to have. And then we will get into the actual recommendations. So when we get into the recommendations, I'll hand over to Charlotte to lead the way. In fact, actually, I think now I'm going to hand over. There we go.
Thanks, Margot. So yes, there have been a few changes since the amendment in May. They're up there on the slide for you. So confirmation of the joint Three Waters CCO delivery model from all the councils now. Development of draft foundation documents or principles for those documents. The draft water services delivery plan has been developed, and the local government water services bill report back went to the Finance and Expenditure Committee earlier this month. So on the draft foundation documents, the statement of expectation principles and customer charter principles have been of particular interest for this work on the amendment, and our recommendations do largely relate to those documents. The water services delivery plan, excuse me, indicates has an indicative increase in investment in stormwater, and we'll talk to that in a bit more detail later on as well. The local government water services bill report back. There are a couple of things that are relevant to this piece of work. The first is around some refinements to what is required in the statement of expectations. And so that's largely around the fact that the statement of expectations does not set strategic priorities, but rather outcomes that the partners expect from the provision of water services. There's also a requirement for a service agreement between a water services provider and transport corridor manager. And so we'll also talk to that a little bit later as well, related to some of the recommendations. Cool. So there's a little bit of strategic context here, and a couple of these points were made in yesterday's briefing, so we won't cover those in too much detail, but really just wanted to kind of contextualise and frame today's conversation. So as it notes there, the stormwater network is made up of engineered and natural systems, which together contribute to stormwater service levels and outcomes. Post-transfer of engineered stormwater assets to Metro Water, the council will retain responsibility for a range of functions and assets which contribute to stormwater service levels and outcomes. And then these last two are the ones that I wanted to really highlight today. So the council must work collaboratively with Metro Water on all water services, including stormwater management, and the development of a stormwater network risk management plan. And that plan is a requirement in the bill. and we are required to work collaboratively, so that's a great opportunity and need for us to be working in collaboration together. The last point there, to support an integrated approach to stormwater management, the Council needs to coordinate its relevant internal functions, as well as liaise with partners to establish the enduring regional approach, which will develop and strengthen over time. And so we'll talk to that when we talk to the recommendations. That really is informing the recommendations today. So we wanted to provide a little bit of insight into the process that we've been through to develop up the recommendations today. So we've done a range of research. We've had internal workshops with some Wellington City Council officers who work in the stormwater kind of space, or there's an influence there. We've also had further discussion with Auckland Council Healthy Waters, who we spoke to last year as well. We've looked through the submissions that were received on the Local Water Done Well consultation earlier this year. We've looked at the draft foundational governance documents. We've also looked at a range of other relevant documents, and we've had a look at the draft or the indicative investment in the Water Services Delivery Plan, as I mentioned. And that work has has provided some key research insights that have informed our recommendations, including those points that you see on the slide there. So the importance of joined-up thinking and formalised working relationships, internal collaboration between council units, and adequate funding and resourcing for an integrated approach to stormwater management. Catchment scale planning has come through, which benefits the engineered network as well as wider natural systems. A really key one here is reliable asset data, as well as catchment planning data and forward planning information, but noting that that developing this it takes time and also strategic prioritisation. Also building an understanding of the skills required in Metro Water and the Council to support an integrated approach, again noting that these will change and develop over time. There will be different things at different times that are important. The importance of transparent public information about stormwater services and outcomes, and also, and this was really key and discussed at yesterday's session, effectively and transparently managing customer inquiries where issues might overlap across organisations. And so, as I mentioned, these key points have informed the recommendations, and in particular, having a set of recommendations, as we'll discuss, for the foundation documents, but also some recommendations that are specific to Wellington City Council. So, as I mentioned, we had a look at the current LTP investment in the engineered stormwater network for Wellington City Council, and also had a look at the indicative investment in the Water Services Delivery Plan. So the Water Services Delivery Plan contains a large increase in budget for the engineered stormwater network, with the additional indicative investment focused on increased renewals and improving flood resilience by upsizing the pipes. So the graph in front of you is basically comparing for financial years 2027 to 34, the Wellington City Council LTP and the indicative investment, which is in the Water Services Delivery Plan. So through the review of the draft foundational documents, there are a few key reflections that we wanted to share. So feedback on those foundational documents to date includes that water services must be viewed in a catchment context, and also that the documents should give greater reference to expectations on stormwater, including collaboration with councils and key community groups. As to be expected, there is a strong focus in those documents on the establishment of and transition to Metro Water. Te Mana o Te Wai and environmental protection and outcomes also feature in those documents. There are opportunities to reinforce expectations for the visibility of integrated stormwater management and outcomes in both the Statement of Expectations and the Customer Charter. We'll talk to our recommendations shortly. And just to note that the Water Services Delivery Plan does have some specific acknowledgements, which are on the right-hand side of the slide there, around investment in stormwater management, to enable Metro Water to manage the broader environmental, social and regulatory aspects of stormwater beyond just the capital works. Okay, so that was a bit of scene setting really, and so we'll move through now into what the draft recommendations are. As a bit of an introduction, as I mentioned, there are sort of two sets of recommendations. The first are around the foundational documents, and these set out expectations specific to Wellington City Council, as well as areas to advocate through the AOG to agree a regional position. They support increased visibility of and expectations for stormwater outcomes, and they really importantly set a foundation for the first 3 years, but build towards the second statement of expectations and water strategy and the future as well. The draft recommendations for the Council in particular, which is the second set that we'll talk to, recognise that a range of the Council's functions and assets will continue to contribute to stormwater service delivery and outcomes post the establishment of Metro Water, and reflect that the transition to Metro Water provides a need and an opportunity to coordinate internal planning, design and delivery to contribute to improved stormwater outcomes, both for the network and environmental outcomes as well. Okay, so the first recommendation on the slide here is in relation to the foundational documents, and this is specific to Wellington City Council. So this is to include a requirement in the Statement of Expectations 2026 to 29, so that's the first Statement of Expectations, that Metro Water works with Wellington City Council to develop and agree a stormwater service level agreement with the Council by the end of year 1, so that's financial year 2026 to 27, covering stormwater related functions across the Council. There are a range of benefits of having a service level agreement for customers, for the Council and for Metro Water. One of those is having a clearly defined scope of services to be delivered, roles and responsibilities in relation to that scope, and the SLA really provides a formal agreement for how the Council and Metro Water will work together, so that's putting that in place. Developing an SLA is a key opportunity to establish clear accountabilities across providers, contributing to operational efficiency, as well as clear expectations and processes for managing customer inquiries and issues, which is a really key point. There are a couple of, there are a couple of keynotes just before we move on this recommendation in particular. So firstly, under the cost to serve model that's been adopted for Metro Water, any requirements or expectations that are specific to Wellington City Council, such as that recommendation, that one, yep, will need to be funded by Wellington City Council ratepayers. So that's a key point. So if elected members decide to support the development of an SLA, we'll need to be mindful of the likely additional cost on top of increased water charges. Secondly, as I mentioned briefly earlier, the report back on the bill to the committee includes a requirement, which was not in the original bill as introduced, for a service agreement to be agreed between transport corridor managers and the entity. So this recommendation in front of us here covers all stormwater related functions of council and provides a time-bound expectation for when that would happen. So we will keep an eye on the development of that requirement in the bill, but it's something that we'll just need to see where the Act ultimately lands. Yep. Okay, so we've got a few additional recommendations for the foundational documents, and these are areas that we recommend that the Council AOG representative advocates for regional agreement on. And that's because stepping into a partnership arrangement, we need to obviously be thinking about the council, but also in a regional sense as well. And so we've got some recommendations for the Statement of Expectations and some for the Customer Charter. So you can see there that the recommendations are that the Statement of Expectations 2026-29, so that's the first one, specifies integrated stormwater management as an outcome that partners expect Metro Water to achieve. includes environmental performance indicators and measures in the intended stormwater level of service, requires Metro Water to work with councils to develop a regional stormwater service level agreement to inform the next statement of expectations, and requires Metro Water to work with councils and partners to define and support a catchment scale approach to stormwater planning and delivery, also to inform the next statement of expectations. And the 2 points on the customer charter there are that the customer charter explicitly refers to the provision of all 3 waters in the principles and also makes specific reference to stormwater in the corporate values. So those are those 2 areas there. Sorry, my font size went a bit rogue there. So this slide is talking to the draft recommendations for Wellington City Council. So as I mentioned earlier, as well as strengthening or introducing sort of specifics for Metro Water, there are also opportunities for Wellington City Council, and the council retains accountability for natural stormwater components. So the 3 recommendations there are kind of stepping through from the current financial year to next financial year to the future. So the first recommendation is that in the current financial year, to note that the council's water reform transition program will include a stormwater specific work stream to support a coordinated approach to design, planning and delivery of stormwater within the council's accountabilities. That piece of work will confirm the 26-27 financial year resource and budget requirements for 26-27 annual plan discussions. And there's no additional budget required for that piece. For next financial year, so that's 2026 to 27, subject to the agreement for a Wellington City Council specific SLA and confirmed budget for 2026-27, lead the development of the council's stormwater SLA with Metro Water, continue to strengthen the council's internal coordinated approach to design, planning, monitoring and management of stormwater, and develop the enduring approach to the council's stormwater management. And then going forward into the LTP 2027, looking at future investment needs and priorities identified in the earlier years, being presented for consideration in those future documents.
Cool. So that essentially is the end of our briefing to you. So what would be good to test with you, perhaps once we've been through any of your questions, is a question we actually have for you, which is recognising that there's a lot of we need to work this out over the coming 10 months situation, is whether elected members would like to have a semi-regular briefing on the development and involvement of stormwater relationships with Metro Water, probably something like 3 monthly along those lines. But that's just a question. I appreciate this is a briefing rather than a workshop, but it's a question we thought we'd put to you. So I think now we'll take questions, if that's all right.
I think the answer to that question would be yes. So I'm seeing nods and I'm not seeing. So yes, so thank you for asking. And we'll go to questions. Councillor Rogers.
My first one was just around the capital investment forecasts that differed from what we were using for WCC. I was wondering, did we use the same AEP for both of those modelling scenarios, or in the WSDP are we modelling to a lower AEP than we were for the delivery of our current stormwater arrangements? Sorry, annual exceedance probability. Annual exceedance probability.
I need to check.
The probability that a flood exceeds what we were planning for in any given year.
So I'm not entirely sure, but I'll take that back. I'll send an email around with a response.
Because I guess my question is, is the higher cost of delivery coming, and the higher forecasted cost of delivery coming from a change in what we are modelling for, and kind of the thing that's going on in my mind is that's kind of we've decided what we're going to deliver before we've decided the SLA. And so it's kind of, that sort of question about if the SLA changes, then the delivery, I imagine, would change as well.
Yes, to a certain degree, although what is in the draft WSDP is looking at the condition of the pipes and the condition of and the timing of what's due to be replaced, what should be replaced, so it doesn't take into account any kind of SLA expectations, absolutely. But the financials that are provided, and we do have a briefing to you on the WSDP next week, so we'll go into this in a bit more detail, but what's in the WSDP consider as, I think as Charlotte indicated, is indicative, and the actual investment program will be confirmed in the water services strategy that will be developed in the first part of next calendar year. And so that does give us time to think about and progress some of the SLA thinking that we could then talk to Metro Water and about incorporating as well. So, but I will come back to you on the AEP.
Cool. Can I ask a couple?
I think that question confirms that you're an NERD.
Thank you. If I could ask more questions. With
Yeah, you can have another question.
Earlier on in the slides, it kind of talked about the joined up thinking and the sort of needing to work together, and I understand that, you know, we kind of delivered that direction through the amendment. I guess the question that I had at the briefing yesterday, which I don't think was adequately answered, was ultimately who holds the responsibility for driving cost-benefit outcomes across both reticulated networks and natural networks? Like, who actually holds the lever saying, we want you to deliver these things? And, you know, how do we use the mechanisms like the SOE if the water entity is saying we only deal with reticulated networks, to say, actually don't deliver that because we've got a more cheap way to deliver it through, like, putting better drainage in our parks, for example?
Absolutely. So Dougal List, our Program Establishment Director, is with us, so I'll have a first crack, and then Dougal, just if there's anything you want to add, please do. So the Statement of Expectations is a really powerful document for council, because what we put in the SOE, Metro Water needs to respond to. So we do need to think quite carefully about what we put in the SOE from a region, as a partner group, but also from a WCC point of view. That also needs to be balanced carefully with the more we add in, the more likely it is we add cost to our residents and ratepayers, and that's something we need to be very cognizant of. However, in terms of setting the direction of the outcomes that we wish to see for our city and or region, that is up to us as a council and us as a partners group to set out in the Statement of Expectations. So those outcomes need to be articulated for Metro Water to respond to. And so it would be quite prudent for us to think about setting out those cost efficiency outcomes in there. But the accountability for how that is done and the approach, the mechanisms, the tools, that is with Metro Water, and that is their accountability. Their job is to deliver the outcomes that we have set. I'm just going to pause for Dougal. Is there anything you would like to add?
Just to build on, I mean, the question is really important because we will need to think about integrated solutions from upstream through to the pipe at the end. So taking that integrated catchment approach helps to identify where the problem sits, where the accountability for addressing the problem sits, and also what are the range of solutions to address that problem. So we're trying to move from a basis where we need to increase the size of the pipe to where's the water coming from and why, and how do we better manage that upstream in order to achieve better, environmental quality and flood risk management outcomes, which will need to take an integrated approach to solutions and also value for money considerations. So I think value for money considerations is a really important part, but also it's going to need to be considered as part of a broader approach to an integrated approach to dealing with stormwater. So that's what I add to that. Just if I can respond to your early question as well in relation to changing AEP. The increased investment is less to do with any changes to standards and more to do with the investment that's required to address the network risks and issues. So as you'll be aware, across the region, we are renewing a very, very small part of the network currently. So the majority of the increased investment indicated in the Water Services Plan for stormwater for Wellington City is directly related to renewals investment.
Okay. Could I attempt to summarise something back just for confirmation?
really.
Okay, so like in a scenario, you would, even though the WSDP is saying you're only responsible for the reticulated network, in the delivery of that reticulated network, you would be thinking about where the stormwater is coming from, and before delivering a project, you might come to us and say, actually, we think we don't need to deliver this if you can deliver this for your community, and then that means we don't have to do it on our end.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Councillor Free.
One thing that's been on my mind quite a bit is slope stability, because I live in quite a steep part of, hilly part of Wellington. What sort of formal things can be put in place to make sure it's clear as to the responsibilities? Because I can see tricky situations arising where it's not clear whether stormwater's overflowed versus retaining walls have or haven't been put in place versus plantings perhaps not adequate, and the whole thing could become a finger pointing exercise if it's not really clear who's and which entity is responsible for which bit. And slope stability is a really big issue. One that worries me.
Yeah. Look, it's no surprise the complexity of stormwater. I think the whole time we've been having these local water done well conversations, stormwater has always had that label of it's really complex and complicated, and that is, I think, reflected in terms of the draft legislation, but also the Commerce Commission's approach, and it is hard and it's challenging. So I don't have an answer on that at the moment, but we do have a period of time between now and July where we need to work out to a certain degree, to a certain level of detail, that type of information, because we do need to be clear on roles and responsibilities, and they need to be articulated in a transfer agreement. We also have things like the statement of expectations and the customer charter that we can be a bit more explicit on, but it really is the transfer agreement where we need to start getting into that level of specificity, and that's why what Charlotte has talked to this morning, we think having a stormwater-specific SLA for Wellington City would give us an extra level of clarity of roles and responsibilities, funding approach, especially while Metro Water are establishing and getting their own organisation up and running. So we're just trying to put in as many belts and braces as possible.
Definitely support, I won't be here of course, but I do support the need to keep a line of conversation open with elected members. But apart from anything else, I think the experience that we have on the ground, dealing with constituents and with seeing actual situations that develop, it could be useful, really worthwhile.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we need to take some known case studies, and when our thinking has progressed about how we think roles and responsibilities might work, we could take some case studies and test those against those hypothetical roles and responsibilities just to see how it lands, whether we think it's going to be the right approach.
And then, yesterday I did attend the briefing, thank you. I actually was a bit unnerved by the thought that I think it was said that our council is actually going to charge the rates for the Wellington Metro. Now, originally I thought it was going to be completely clear that they were actually going to deal with set up their own customer service desk, and actually transparently people are going to pay them money like we do to the electricity company and actually know who we're dealing with. But then I thought I heard yesterday that might not be the case.
So that is what you heard, but let me just to clarify. So the customer relationship is definitely with Metro Water from 1 July. The billing will be separate. There will be a period of time where we think, and it's not confirmed yet, but we think billing will be processed via councils for a short period of time, and that is an on behalf of arrangement that we're exploring at the moment. However, if that does come to pass, the billing will be separate from council rates.
Right. The
customer relationship is with Metro Water, and I've just had a conversation with someone this morning about that. And ideally, the water charge bill that people receive would have a Metro Water phone number on it, a contact centre, so all the queries start there. They may come back to council if it's something about direct debit hasn't happened, but the engagement starts with Metro Water. But that's thinking we're working through at the moment.
That's really important because, we've been criticised by the auditor for breakdowns in communication, for customers being handled through our phone centre or their phone centre. I honestly think that is fundamental to getting this right.
Councillor, can I just actually jump on and reinforce your point, because it's going to be a really hard transition for members of the community as well. You know, they have automatic payments for their rates which incorporate water charges within them now, and so we do need to uncover this, and that is a very active work stream that is being pushed through the regional group. So good progress is being made, but we do need, you know, there is a lot of work in that space.
Councillor Brown.
We signed off a LTP based on a genuine expectation that the money that we have committed through that mechanism would be sufficient to meet our obligations, and that figure is $174 million over 10 years. Now, you're telling us that some other entity has come up with a potential figure of $3, which is roughly $3,500 more per ratepayer for that period. Now, what I really struggle to understand, and maybe I'm hoping you could help me, is why we wouldn't just say that's the figure, the $174 million. Now you define the delivery standards that will actually require, because you know, these guys are definitely all they've ever spoken about is wanting to spend other people's money, and this is a really good example of that. And they're not being accountable in any shape or form for this. Now, why wouldn't we just? So my question is, why wouldn't we have just started by saying, you've got $174 million, now write the standards accordingly, because that is the figure that we, the Wellington City Council, has felt was the sufficient funding to achieve a desirable outcome in respect of stormwater. And I don't understand why we need to actually have a new standard imposed that is going to impose a cost of $3,600 per ratepayer. So can you explain to me why we haven't just started with the figure and gone on from there, rather than starting with a sort of a higher standard that potentially is looking to impose a massively increased cost on our ratepayers?
So the funding that's in the LTP, not just for stormwater but for all waters, has always been very clearly signalled that it is not enough to address the risks and the issues that we have across our network. So I don't believe that starting with the amount that's in the LTP would be the best approach to address the risks and the issues we know is there. Whether that amount is the right amount or not could be discussed, but we do need to understand that there is a need for additional investment. Andrea, did you?
Can I just make the clarification that at the moment we don't have anything in our LTP, because through the LTP amendment, we took it out. And so that funding, therefore, is not in our forecasts as a council now. We've made the assumption that this would be completed through Metro Water.
So I've got a related question. In your process that arrives at the service agreement, there's nothing at all about cost, and why wouldn't, I mean, I think that's absolutely critical, so that if we do define a level of a standard of service delivery, let's say we go from our 1 in 5 flood to 1 in 10 or whatever, is implied by this bigger spend, that the council laws who are going to actually be signing off this statement of service delivery, they need to actually see the costs associated with the additional standards. So it's not enough for, it's very easy for councillors to say, look, of course we want to have a 1 in 10 or a 1 in 15, or we want to reduce the pollution that's happening in the sea or whatever. It's very easy to set lofty and aspirational goals, but it's critically important that all of those goals are costed, so that people can understand that if we go from 1 in 5 to a 1 in 10, it's going to cost ratepayers another $2,000 or whatever the figure is. So, I would definitely not be willing to accept your recommendation because it doesn't include any costings. And I think that's a critical flaw in what you've put in front of us today.
Before we answer that, I sort of want to add to that question, because when we do an LTP process, we go through balancing all of the costs and coming up with something that we believe will be affordable for the public, and has any consideration about what will be affordable for people to pay been part of determining that figure?
So if I start with Councillor Brown's question, so the advice we've presented today is based on what we believe is the best approach. You're right that it doesn't have costs associated, and it will need to have costs associated. However, a service level agreement will require Wellington Council and Metro Water to have conversations together. It is an agreement between two parties. At the moment, Metro Water doesn't exist, so we can't have that conversation. Plus also, until we take direction from yourselves as to whether you would like to entertain the idea of a service level agreement, we don't know what would be included within that to then be able to cost it. So I absolutely agree with you that any final decision on a service level agreement must include costs. It would also have to include what are the objectives, what are the outcomes, and that's how we enable what capability, that's how we understand what capabilities are required, maybe technology, and therefore determine the cost. So yes, I agree. I would suggest that where we're at now with this advice is simply seeking direction on whether that's something you wish to explore. Chair, to your question around affordability, so through the WSDP development we have tested affordability, and we have been working with DIA on their guidance around affordability as well, so that has been factored into the consideration and what has been presented in the WSDP.
Further to that, we are going to commission research on affordability for the next LTP, for the 2027 LTP, to take this into consideration, because it's going to be independent of councils, so to help inform councils' decision making going forward. That will be a key component to the 27 LTP.
But almost I find that more alarming, because costs will be imposed on Wellingtonians that we have very little control over, and then what we can do as a council with the other areas are heavily constrained by that potentially. Yay, all right, great. Councillor Randall.
Thank you. I was going to ask you this, continuing on the topic, I do think it's very important when it comes to these costs that both the council and the public taking on the journey is to understand them. And so I guess I'm going to ask the same question, but in a quite different way, and that is, can we get some more detailed information about what the previous cost estimate, that was the assumed cost that was put in the original LTP, and I assume the costs actually, we didn't do it. I assume those costs came from Wellington Water in terms of the negotiations that they did as part of the input for the long-term plan. And so, can we get to say, well, what were they going to do in stormwater for $175 million? So now it's looking at 400 and something million. And again, can we actually see what we're getting for the money? Because it's actually, in the end, if we're spending more, I assume we're getting more, but we do need to understand two important elements to that. One is, are we paying more per kilometre or metre of stormwater pipe changed? And are we actually, because it seems to me that one of the two estimates is not necessarily honest, and the lack of honesty around what is really needed in water has been an ongoing underlying problem through this whole triennium of the debate. And so, take us on, can we get some more information, some more detailed information, of course, allowing us for the spreadsheets.
I just think you want to be careful about the use of the word honesty in there. You're sort of implying...
I'm just trying to reconcile the differences, because as it was pointed out, and as you've pointed out, have they raised the standards? And Councillor Rogers pointed out, have they changed the standard? Have they changed? Are they doing the same thing?
The consistency is one thing, but implying that there's dishonesty, I think, is...
maybe I'm speaking from And lack of clarity, I'll say.
thank you.
Okay, no, I appreciate that.
Can
No,
I
honesty is right.
answer your question? I think our LTP forecasts have always been balanced with what the council can afford, and therefore we have had certain constraints in the forecast that we have highlighted, and also the forecasts are for a 10-year period, not going further out. What the transition to Metro Water enables us to do is actually look at different aspects of what can be affordable, because all of this sits off our balance sheet and within the constraints of what the council can afford, and it is also looking at a longer term view in terms of its modelling. And so, you've had a view through the long-term plan that hasn't necessarily incorporated all of the costs because they haven't been affordable to the council as an organisation. However, that is the incentive to move to Metro Water, because we can actually undertake the greater scope of work.
Yes, I accept that, and we're having water taken off us because arguably we haven't invested adequately in water. So, and that's the purpose. So we want to meet the purpose. I just want to know what we're going to get, what the public's going to get for the, what it was going to get and what it will now get.
So the briefing that we have scheduled with you for next week on the WSDP, we will certainly take you through that.
Yeah, so I want to see some numbers, more detailed numbers as well. Okay. Can I have a couple more questions? Not so long questions. Okay, so just in terms of the SLAs, I'm a bit concerned that the other party, which is the Greater Wellington Regional Council, was not even mentioned. And I just challenge you or ask you, can we do an SLA with Metro Water without the Greater Wellington Regional Council being a party to that, given that they have enormous responsibilities and as well in terms of catchment management and stormwater management?
Yes, absolutely. And that's what we've been talking with Greater Wellington on this as well. So we're talking here specifically about Metro Water and having that relationship with them. It wouldn't preclude Greater Wellington being involved in that arrangement at all.
Well, I just suggest I don't think we can do it without them, because again, the responsibilities are three-way in most areas. And so I would suggest we need a three-way SLA, not necessarily a two-way one. The second question, you're talking about a regional SLA. When it comes to stormwater, my observation is it's very catchment based, and I would just maybe suggest, ask you whether it would be possible to, rather than try and solve the whole problem one off for the entire region, can we sort of walk before we run and say, can we look at a more of a catchment based arrangement? Because some catchments are within one territorial authority, within our own territorial authority, and there's one key catchment, of course, in the northern ward around the Porirua stream, which is shared also with Porirua Council. And I'm just thinking that the problems may be easier to deal with at the SLA level, at a catchment level, as opposed to a regional level.
And I think that's why we've called out talking about catchment level as well. But anything that we're talking about regional is for outer years. And so to your point about can we crawl before we walk or whatever way around. So definitely agree with that approach, which is why we were suggesting we prioritise looking at WCC needs first rather than starting with regional level.
Okay.
I'll come back to you if you've got more, Councillor. Councillor Pannett's been very patient online.
Thank you very much. First question is, what is the consequence if Metro Water doesn't meet the terms of the SLA? And the second question is, how can we make sure that they treat the stormwater issue in all its facets as very urgent? Thank you.
Starting with your last question, Councillor, in terms of the urgency, again, and just keep coming back to how we articulate the outcomes that we require in the Statement of Expectations will be really important. I don't believe we will have any authority to determine priorities and say that any one thing is more urgent or higher priority than the other, but how we articulate the outcomes we're seeking can go some way to lead that conversation. The question around the SLA, should Metro Water not meet the requirements or the expectations in there, that would obviously be built into the SLA around any penalties or dispute management. I would say that would be typical SLA contractual agreement conditions.
So just one last question, but this is not just a contract. This is about making sure that our city is safe from a real threat. So are you basically saying we just don't really have much teeth?
No, I don't think I would put it that way. I think we do have, as one of the owners and the partners of Metro Water, we will have authority and we will have teeth. It's how we articulate that authority through the statement of expectations, and I think even as important, how we enact our role as partners and economic owners with the other councils and mana whenua, how we enact that role is just as important as what we articulate in the statement of expectations. So I do think we do have teeth. It is about how we articulate them and then how we deliver on that.
All right, Councillor Free, and then did you have more? Okay, can we try and get through these quickly because we've got the other part of the session. Yeah, Councillor Free and then Councillor.
You're talking about outcomes, and I'm going back to my slips. How would you craft an outcome around slope stability in Wellington? Because I think we've got to.
I had an awful feeling you were going to ask that. I don't know, but that is something we can certainly work on, yes. I understand the importance and understand being able to craft it in a way that it is not ambiguous. So I do hear you. I just don't know right now how we would articulate that, but agree we need to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Randall?
Yes, I just wanted to raise the last issue is the asset data and how critical it is. I just want to ask, we've heard about water asset data since I first arrived at council and how significant work was happening and how we were building new models and what's been done in the last 3 years around water asset data collection that means that we still haven't actually got what all the assets are.
It's really a question for Wellington Water. Who are not
well,
here.
I mean, no, but you're inheriting and you've obviously gone into the asset thing. And I mean, let me put it this way. Is Wellington Water's stormwater asset information quite poor? And that means we need to actually do more.
One moment.
So within I can answer part of the question. So the quality of the stormwater information isn't great. That is clearly outlined in our infrastructure strategy. That is something that the entire country has a challenge with because stormwater has been the poor cousin of wastewater and water. Over the last 3 years, since the 2021 LTP, there was a significant push by Wellington Water to collect better asset information, particularly around the reticulated water and wastewater network. And of course, there was significant work that we also completed on the state of some of our treatment plants, etc. That is where most of the effort has gone into, and there is an absolute acknowledgement for need for continuing better information on asset data, and that has been really clearly disclosed in our infrastructure strategy, which is within our LTP.
Okay, thank you.
Right, we will now, thank you. That was, so we'll move on to the second part. Councillors, do you need a little break or do you just want to keep? No, you're just going to keep going? All right, we'll move on to thank you, Charlotte. Margot, you're still in the hot seat, aren't you? And welcome Harry to the table. You'll need a break after this, Margot. Chocolate fish.
Okay. Okay, so we'll move on to the second part of the briefing. So again, going back to May, you asked us to go away and do some thinking around the possibility of establishing a consumer advocacy group. So that is this part of the briefing. Now, I'm conscious of time, so if we move through quite quickly, we can always come back to things through your Q&A. So the amendment that was raised was, oh, sorry, beg your pardon. I'd just like to introduce Harry Bates. My apologies, very rude of me. Introduce Harry. Harry has been working with me on this, this amendment and the advice coming back to you today. So the amendment as was presented in May is quite multifaceted. There's a number of components here which don't necessarily fit together. But so what we have done is we have broken them out into the individual components, and then at the end of the briefing, we will look to bring them back together to a coherent set of recommendations for you. So again, this is the exact same slide that Charlotte talked to you about through Stormwater. So again, the same changes that we have seen also apply to this advocacy group. So our thinking around statement of expectations, our thinking around financial assistance, and how Metro Water might provide any assistance to our community. That has been articulated in the draft Water Services Delivery Plan. The thinking around how some of these expectations feature in the foundational governance documents. So whilst this is the same list of changes from the stormwater slide, the same work that's being done and progressed has also impacted on possible consumer advocacy. So very, very briefly, did just want to step through the change timeline from our community's point of view. So the left-hand box there is talking about the initial changes happening from July 2026. Now, what is important to note is our residents and ratepayers will not notice a big bang change on the 1st of July. So the changes that are being delivered are being implemented incrementally. And initially the changes will be for the ratepayer cohort of our community. And it's not until outer years where the changes through the likes of introducing volumetric charging that starts to impact broader and impacts on residents, i.e. not just ratepayers. So what is presented in the draft Water Services Delivery Plan is the thinking that volumetric charging is likely to be introduced or could be introduced by Metro Water in and around financial year 29. So again, just reiterating, that's not a change that will happen on day one. So the thinking about the changes that get introduced to the community have informed our thinking about any need for consumer advocacy and how we respond to that and how it aligns to the changes being felt by the community. So at this point, I will hand over to Harry and to step you through monitoring and reporting and then stepping into the actual recommendations.
Thank you, Margot. So the Water Services Bill will establish a comprehensive monitoring and reporting environment, including the requirement for mandatory planning and reporting. So some of these key planning and reporting documents we've outlined on the page. It's obviously the statement of expectation. So through the statement of expectation, the Partners Committee are required to confirm their expectations to Metro Water at least 6 months before the water strategy is required. The water strategy is prepared every 3 years, and this is essentially the LTP for water, and this must give effect to the statement of expectations. The annual report reports on actual progress against the water services strategy, and the 6-monthly report reports on requirements identified in the statement of expectations. Additionally, Metro Water will be subject to ComCom's information disclosure regime. We are unsure of the content of these disclosures at the moment, but these should be available within 6 months of the bill being enacted, so should be available before Metro Water's first day occurs. We expect these disclosures to be quite extensive, and note that all water services providers will be required to provide them. One point worth noting is that within the annual reporting, the financial statements must be prepared and presented in a way that anyone can understand them. Transparency is a key requirement of the reporting environment. Next slide, please. So as part of our research for this part of the amendment, we've engaged with Watercare's head of retail operations to understand their approach to financial assistance. We've engaged with officers to understand how council currently supports low-income ratepayers. We have reviewed the additional details that are now provided in the Water Services Delivery Plan and foundational documents. We now have a much clearer understanding of roles and responsibilities in the new world when Metro Water owns, manages and operates water services. I understand that in previous discussions there has been an interest in adopting a similar approach to Watercare. And just before we jump into Watercare's approach, I just wanted to distinguish between the difference between hardship and equity financial assistance. So hardship, as described by Watercare, is to provide one-off support to individuals who may be going through a tough period in their life, such as a job loss, rather compared to equity support, which is something such as tiered or concessionary pricing, which looks to help low-income households ongoing. So in terms of Watercare's approach, they have established the Water Utility Consumer Trust, and this provides hardship support to help get customers back on track. The trust can write off up to $2,500 per applicant incrementally over time as the customer makes payments in line with an agreed budget. Something key to note here is that Watercare does not provide equity support to their customers. Jumping on to in terms of the Metro Water context, the draft Water Services Delivery Plan requires Metro Water to consider financial hardship and equity support. In addition, as you will be aware, the idea of a consumer charter has been introduced to provide confidence and assurance to consumers that their needs and wider concerns and interests will be met by Metro Water. Slide, please. Our advice centres around the intent that Metro Water directly provides financial assistance to residents as the owner, manager and provider of water services to the metropolitan Wellington region. One thing we want to note is that the current wording within the WSDP is centred around Metro Water considering financial assistance. So to ensure that financial assistance is introduced promptly by Metro Water, it is recommended that Council advocates for regional agreement that Metro Water go beyond just exploring, considering and implement financial assistance schemes to support our low-income community. In addition, we would require Metro Water to make the financial assistance scheme readily available and accessible. Great. The community, as Margot mentioned, the community will not experience a big bang change when water services are transferred to Metro Water next year. Key changes that ratepayers and renters will notice will include Metro Water directly leading engagement with customers relating to water services, and water services will incrementally increase. Metro Water will directly provide financial assistance to low-income customers as proposed in this advice. And the draft WSDP has modelled the introduction of volumetric charging by FY29 at the earliest. Metro Water could of course bring this forward, however for now we're aligning our advice with the draft WSDP. Noting that when volumetric water charging is introduced, all residents, this includes renters, will receive water bills directly from Metro Water. So our advice supports the need to monitor and provide visibility of adverse community impacts to elected members. So key considerations of introducing a WCC community change oversight function include the timing of the function to align with changes, noting that there will not be a big bang change to customers, rather iterative changes over time, reducing additional costs to ratepayers where possible, noting that the community will be levied directly for the Commerce Commission's new regulatory oversight role, and working collaboratively with Metro Water to support our community in planned major change initiatives. It is recommended to include 1 to 2 questions in the annual resident survey to explore the impacts of Metro Water providing water services. This will provide visibility of impacts to elected members. And just one thing to note is that the next report will be completed before Metro Water becomes operational. So the first water services monitoring survey results will be presented around June 2027. Next slide, please.
So just because of time, we had thought we would pause here for questions, or we can keep going. We'll take your lead, Chair.
We have a couple, so let's do those. Councillor Rogers.
Yeah, mine was just a quick one around the assistance scheme. Between the Metro providing it and individual councils providing it, I was wondering if any sort of consideration was given to councils' ability to access things like the ratepayer assistance scheme if it was set up.
So we do need to take care that water services will not be a council function from July, and so therefore we don't believe it is eligible under that scheme. We think it was actually explicitly discounted.
Okay, cool.
We understand it has been explicitly discounted, I should say.
Councillor Brown.
Thanks. As you can imagine, I'm 100% opposed to what you're proposing. Just to, state my position. But
I don't think anybody asked him.
No. But I guess the part which I have got a question about is that the monitoring and reporting environment that is depicted on this, is it in any way an improvement on the utterly deficient regime that exists at present? And if so, could you just be explicit about where the improvement, given that we are doubling the charges, or we're proposing to double the water charges on our residents over the next 10 or so years, how is this going to protect them in terms of a value for money proposition and give them any confidence at all that the money which they are going to be paying for water services is actually well directed?
So just to be clear, the monitoring and reporting environment is not a design of council's making. That is as per the legislative environment. So the improvements, it is up to us to find the improvements in the system, and it is up to us to use what has been offered to us in the legislation to make best. And so that is things like the statement of expectations. It's also things like where the legislation provides us with discretion, such as reporting, content, frequency, using that to make sure we get the information in a way that works for us and our communities and the time that we require it. So we just have to work within those bounds to make it as effective as possible. And again, I come back to a point I made, I think it was in response to Councillor Pannett's earlier question. It's also about how we work as a council and how elected members work, engaging with the other councils to ensure that the governance is right across Metro Water, and that's set up in a way that will give the value that we are all seeking across the region.
That's not a very encouraging, anyhow, but so my follow-up question really is that what is wrong with establishing a standalone consumer advocacy group? Why what do you see as the disadvantages of having that entity representing Wellington City consumers? Why don't you want that?
Well, it's just to be clear, it's not about not wanting it. It is what we've done is we have taken the component parts that we were asked to look at, and when we look at those and then we bring our position on those back together, we don't believe that there is sufficient value to be added to our community with the cost that would be associated with that on top of the increasing water charges environment. What we have been looking to do is to be as cost effective as possible with the working environment we're in. So we need to understand as well that council will have a significant level of independence from Metro Water, and we can use that to our advantage. So the establishing an external group, I don't think would give us any distinct advantage. I think the other thing as well is understanding if an advocacy group were to be set up, how would it work with council? Because an advocacy group would need to work to council. Council then works to the partner representative for the partners committee, which is then working for the region. So it adds complexity that we don't think helps advance anything that our community is after. We think there would be better for council to have a more direct role to play in this rather than using an external group.
Sorry, just a little follow-up on one point you've made there. So, but so if we said to you, which I hope we will, go away and tell us how an independent consumer advocacy group would work with council. So you haven't done that work at this point, but we could ask you for specifically to actually address that particular point.
Yes, you could.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Chung.
Great, thanks. I've got 3 questions here. First of all, in the slide here, you've just shown the volumetric charges will be applying from 2029, but there's been no decision from this council as to whether we actually want to go into purchase water meters and go into volumetric charging. So perhaps I can ask them one at a time and we can go through the questions.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
So you're correct, there has not as yet been an explicit decision. However, when we bring to you on the 20th of August the request to adopt the Water Services Delivery Plan, at that point council would be accepting and endorsing the introduction of water meters and therefore volumetric charging. And just to point out, the timeframes that we've talked about, the financial year 29, they are indicative and they're as what's modelled in the WSDP, but those timeframes could change and that's at the discretion of Metro Water.
Okay, so if we oppose volumetric, or if we oppose installing water meters, then we would oppose the Water Service Delivery Plan. We would vote against
Yes.
that. Okay,
yes,
great.
which then introduces a significant issue for this council and our other 4 partner councils in terms of being able to meet government's mandated date of 3rd of September.
That's fine. We have to do what we think is best for Wellington City. The second question is charges for water after July 2026. That's next year, isn't it? So at the moment, we're charging residents for their water.
Rate payment.
Okay, so from July onwards, are we going to take that charge, that water charge, that component out of the rates for Wellington? And
Yes.
so are we going to do that on a sliding scale so that, or are we going to start getting the bills from Metro Water at that time so that it will switch the equivalent or the increased amount to residents, so that amount that we're currently incorporating into the rates account would be deducted from there and they would receive a new bill at that stage?
Yes, that is what we've signalled for some time now,
Yep.
and that's what we signalled during consultation, that from July, council rates bills will no longer have a water element
Yep.
to it, and that from July, Metro Water will issue water charge bills, and they will be separate to council.
Great, thanks.
Yes.
And the last question, I just wanted a confirmation of that. And the last question is that in this new entity, and I'm just not positive about what you've just said earlier about how we actually operate the Metro Water, is it possible for Wellington to actually be in this new water entity in Metro Water? However, we still take responsibility for what happens in Wellington City. So therefore, can it be what Wellington City does, ring fence inside Metro Water, so that we ensure that we get value for the amount that we're actually putting into Wellington Water, and have that ring fence within the Metro Water?
So I think I've said this so many times this morning. So when we present the WSDP to you next week in the briefing, so we will take you through quite a bit of detail like that. One of the things we will talk you through is the cost to serve model. So the work that has been done to date on the establishment planning for Metro Water is on a cost to serve basis. So what that means is the water charges that will be charged to Wellington ratepayers initially will be based on the level of service Wellington City receives. So Wellington City will not be paying or subsidising Upper Hutt, Porirua, Hutt City, etc., and vice versa for them. So that is the cost to serve model. And so that is essentially ring fencing for Wellington City. And that's the premise on which Metro Water is being established.
Great, excellent, thank you.
Councillor Randall.
One small question, bigger question. The small question is, I'm aware that there are a number of properties in Wellington City that have multiple houses on them, and that they are charged the same per property water charge as properties with one residence on it. Is that going to change under the Metro Water model?
I don't know, councillor. We'll have to look into that. There's a, as you could imagine, there's a raft of information and detail we need to work through in the next best part of a year, and it'll be getting down into that level of detail. But here and now, I couldn't answer.
Okay, that's right. Under this chart here, I just want to understand the statement of expectations, because this says the statement of expectations comes from the Metro Water Partners Committee. It doesn't come from council.
Correct.
And so if the City Council puts up a statement of expectations, is it possible that the Metro Waters Partners Committee, where we have one of 7 votes, can amend the statement of expectations that we put forward?
So if we just step back for a moment, so the legislation requires shareholders to issue a single statement of expectation to the water provider. So that means that our collective of 5 councils and 2 mana whenua partners need to bring their individual expectations and collaborate on those and establish a single statement of expectation instruction to Metro Water. So if we then work back a reverse domino effect, to be able to issue a single statement of expectation, that means that each council, I would assume, will need to work through their own internal process to establish what are their expectations, to then be able to put that into the collective conversation. Now, where that might land is, for the most part, the region as a whole can easily establish a single statement of expectations. But it may also mean that for us, Wellington City, that we identify that we have a particular expectation that is only relevant to us or is a particular priority for us. I should use a different word because we're not allowed to use priorities and expectations anymore, but we have a particular outcome that we are seeking that is not as relevant to the other territorial authorities, so we can explicitly include that. We do need to think about the complexity of the instruction we give Metro Water, so the more specifics and detail we give them, the more complicated it is for them to actually deliver on, but it's also needing to make sure we look after our community as well. So it is going to be a balancing act between us and our partners, and then that conversation with Metro Water.
So do we need the support, if we do want to have a specific outcome for Wellington City, do we need the support of our Metro Water partners to get that into the statement of expectations?
Not necessarily. Those expectations would then be listed as specific to Wellington City.
Okay, and is it expected that mana whenua partners will also have statements of expectations, and they will be part of Metro Waters?
Yes, our mana whenua partners are members of the Partners Committee, so absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
All right, should we move on? Have we got more presentation?
We did have, I'm thinking we probably should wrap up.
Okay.
To go into the summary, if that's okay.
Okay, yes,
because I'm sure there'll be, could be some more questions.
Okay.
So what I would say is, if there are any follow-up questions or conversations, really happy to have those, sit down with any of the elected members and have those. So in terms of the summary of the recommendations, what we are advising in these draft recommendations is that Council does not establish an external consumer advocacy group, and that because of the expectations that are outlined in the draft water services delivery plan is that Council does not provide additional financial assistance to low-income households. What we do recommend, though, is that Council advocates via the AOG for a regional agreement for Metro Water to go beyond exploring options and actually ensure a financial assistance scheme is implemented. Ideally, that is within by the end of the first year, and that we introduce a monitoring approach to look at the adverse impacts, and that would be done via the annual residents monitoring survey. And ensuring that where at all possible that our reporting and information requirements are articulated in the statement of expectations, so that requires Metro Water to deliver on those, and it also means that it's very clear what we require as council. And finally, that last point there is, for all of the above to work well, is that we will need to think about internally how council collective, that's officers and elected members, work together to get the best out of the system, and that we do need to sit down and give some thought to.
Yes. Are there any further questions, councillors? Councillor Rogers.
I might as well ask mine that I was going to put through in an email. Just around the sort of advocacy for consumers, one of the things I'd be keen to understand when we come to evaluate the WSDP is if we could have table 29, which is on page 70, broken down for Wellington specific consumers, Wellington City specific consumers. Thank you.
Yep, Councillor Free.
This yesterday, but I think it's really important. It's increasingly hard to find disaggregated data for anything, like how much we're paying the regional council would be an example. But can we please have as part of our expectations that we will have access to information on what's been collected from the TAs before we move to harmonised pricing, obviously, and what's been spent, so we can actually see a complete transparency. I did ask about it yesterday, but I'm going to make the point again.
So I would say yes. So the reason I was pausing is because the bill is quite prescriptive in what is required in the annual report from Metro Water, and what we are proposing is that the 6-monthly report uses that same approach. So I was just trying to rack my brain whether that requirement is already included in that. But leave that with me, councillor, and we will. I
mean, I think since 2020, it has been hard to get disaggregated information, whether something went from a variety of organisations since perhaps COVID days, I don't know. But I think it's really important that we can actually answer to our ratepayers, that they can go somewhere and see what's going on.
All right, I think that brings us to the end of the session. Thank you for fielding some stroppy questions. Much appreciated.
Thank you, everyone.